Television is not the truth. Television is a goddamn amusement park. Television is a circus, a carnival, a traveling troupe of acrobats, storytellers, dancers, singers, jugglers, sideshow freaks, lion tamers, and football players. We're in the boredom-killing business. So turn off your television sets. Turn them off now. Turn them off right now. Turn them off and leave them off. Turn them off right in the middle of the sentence I'm speaking to you now. Turn them off.
Stop them. An idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by any army.
Welcome to Eradicating Programmed Ignorance, brought to you by the Liberty Beacon Project and broadcast on TLBTV. I'm your host, Roger Landry, the founder of the Liberty Beacon Project, and as in every show, I am joined by the lovely and extremely intelligent Rebecca Mahan, who is also the media director for this project and has her own show called Rebecca Sounds Reveille. I strongly suggest you take a look at these shows because she does a phenomenal job. Today we're going to introduce a new TLBTV host and a new member of the TLB family. And this is somebody, as usual, that Rebecca has found for us. And I've had several discussions with this gentleman, one really good discussion with this gentleman where we actually got on the phone and talked. And Rebecca, I absolutely love what this gentleman stands for, the way he talks, what he presents, what he projects. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about Rick before we bring him in?
Oh my gosh, sharing a little bit about him is very difficult. He's a writer and author, inspirational speaker, blogger, a founder of rickamitin.com. He has traveled extensively as an evangelist. He pastored for many years, and he has built a multi-million-dollar insurance business in Los Angeles before he decided to embark on a personal journey. And there is so much to him. He's an ordained minister, a certified behavioral analyst, and that's from the Institute of Motivational Living. There is so much to him. He's got a number of certifications. He has just attended so much on personal development as far as seminars and a lot of research. You know what? He's spot on about a lot of things that are pertinent to the project.
Well, I really appreciate you giving us that intro. And for anybody who can't see, Rebecca, in her portion of Texas right now, is having a little bit of an internet problem. So if you see your picture freeze up a little bit, as long as we can hear the wisdom coming from her, we can put up with a little bit of freezing picture and a little bit of, I don't know, distortion in the voice every now and then. But trying to do this show with this particular gentleman without you was something I really didn't want to do, because you have the type of a relationship with this gentleman that stretches, I believe, beyond the professional into the friendship level. And this is what I really enjoy so much, is that it's so easy to like this guy. It really is.
It is. It is.
So, Rick, why don't you join us on TLBTV, Eradicating Programmed Ignorance? How are you today, sir?
I'm great. It's nice to see you guys and nice to be with you.
Well, why don't you start all of this off by giving our audience a little bit of your history the way you would like to present it. Now, this is an introduction for your show. And if you've already picked out a name for the show, you can tell everybody what the name of the show is going to be. If you haven't, don't let me put you on the spot. You don't have to think of one right now. But soon you will be hosting your own show. And what I'd like you to do is tell people a little bit about your personal journey and how you think that, and when I use the word qualifies, I use that with the most respect, because I know your studies, your background, what you've been through. So how you feel that has qualified you to step into the role of hosting the show with, and then the last thing, what's the message? What would you like to see the show produce?
Yeah, thank you, Roger. My background was I had a pretty rocky beginning, as in a lot of kids do. Had my real father, 3 stepfathers by the time I was 9 years old. So there was a lot of breakup and turnover and upheaval and, all of the things that go along with it. And I was introduced to faith and religion very early on in my life, and found some comfort in that and embraced that. And I think very early on, somewhere around the age of 10, I felt this calling to minister. I was very moved by a lot of the men and women who came by our church and ministered, and it was something I locked on to very early. But I left home when I was 15. I just couldn't tolerate it anymore, and got into the service as early as I could. Spent 7 years there, in the Marines, so I have some commonality with Rebecca, and so.
Well, you also have some commonality with me, because I'm ex-Navy, and you got to understand, if it wasn't for the Marines, imagine how many gates the Navy would have lost.
Yes, thank you very much. But so, and then some of those years too, I didn't have a solid spiritual path. And so there were times I was disconnected from my faith and all of that. But in my early 20s, or actually late teens, I found my way back to some of my roots and began to pursue ministry. And so I think I probably preached my first sermon somewhere around 19. And, then after getting married and traveling and serving in ministry for almost 30 years, I found some things that were not what I would say ringing true for me. And I brushed a lot of things under the rug, because my Achilles heel is manipulation and fear, which normally comes about by intimidation. Those things just don't work well for me. And I had a lot of questioning, about the authority, about the leadership paradigm, about the way God was presented. And I really found some experiences that were on the negative side. And I really found that I was not in a place that I was being honest with what I believed. And but yet I was compelled, for these religious practices. And at some point, I just had to become honest about that. And so I moved away from the only ministerial organization that I had ever known, without a big upheaval or without a big scandal. I just simply said out loud to myself, I don't believe this is who God really is. And so I had made my living that way. My family was dependent upon, the money that I made, and I just could not do it. And so I left there, and I had already gotten mildly into the insurance business, but had an opportunity to go into the Los Angeles area and open an office. And so I eventually got that up and running, and I was doing a little more than $25 million a year in new business. I went from about 7 agents to about 83. So I had a good run at that, and it was a good canoe while I was adrift to occupy myself until I could find the island that God was leading me to. And so I eventually re-entered ministry again, but from a less structured ministerial environment, and it still had a lot of close ties and connections to my roots. And eventually I did feel a real disconnect with what I felt God was trying to show me, and what I couldn't let go of. And so eventually I held on too long until I tripped my own self up, broke my own heart, had a failure from a moral standpoint. And that began an honest dialogue for probably the first time in my life. And I realized that I had brought pain and brought devastation to, my marriage, my wife, my ministry, everything that I had stood for. I had pretty much undid it. And from that point of feeling like maybe my entire life was over, I began to perceive God differently than I had ever perceived him in my life. To make a long story short, the root of my situation was fatherlessness. And, people sometimes look at people who make mistakes as though they're offering some brand of excuse. But I think excuses are what you meet on the way to discovering the real reasons why things happen and exist. And so I had to deal with the excuses that were really defense mechanisms to preserve myself, while I could try and sort this out and figure out really what happened. Because I had a love for people, I had a love for God, I certainly had a love for my family. I didn't want to be where I was devastated by what I had done, and yet I felt like God was not finished with me. And so I had to continue to respond to him now differently. This was no longer a religion. This had to become something much more than the parameters of ideology. And I needed something real and something that went beyond, where I had ever been. And so I recognized through some therapy and some study and some really searching my own soul that a missing father had translated for me as a missing God. And so I felt like I had met my real father only once when I was 5. And he came into my life, out of nowhere. We had the best 2 hours that any 5-year-old kid could ever have. And there were a lot of laughs and a lot of promises made. And he walks out the door that night, and I never see or hear from him again. And so I knew my father was real. I had met him, and he was out there somewhere. He just wasn't there for me. And I did not understand that we get our initial concepts of God or glimpses of God from our fathers. And when our fathers aren't there, there's a void, that gets created. And so even though I had met God at some level and I knew that he was real and he was there, I had experienced him. Nobody could take that away from me. And I had identified certain gifts in my life, and I had been utilizing those gifts and been touching other people at the same time that I was feeling something was missing from me. And so I recognized that where I needed to trust God and understand God and embrace God at a much deeper level, I couldn't do it because I knew he was there, but he just wasn't there for me at the level that I needed him to be. And so I had to deal with the shame factor, and the shame factor was what immobilized me. And it would have been easy, I think, to just accept defeat, go hide somewhere, and hope nobody ever thinks of you again. But I found the courage to address my issues head on, and I discovered, unconditional love for the first time in my life.
Sometimes what knocks you down the hardest makes you the strongest.
Yeah.
This, you know what I did for a living. I told you, okay? And today I look back on all of this and I realize what I had contributed to. I realize today that I don't feel anything like I did for 30 years while I was doing what I felt was my calling. Yeah. And now I'm sitting here telling everybody what is wrong with this? What is wrong with that? What is wrong with this? But the biggest, what really knocked me to my knees, and you might really be able to appreciate this, Rick, was a friend came over my house one day, and he sat down on my couch, and he opened up my laptop, and he said, for somebody as intelligent as you are, you know so little, it's insane. Well, I looked at him and I said, you need to prove, if you're going to say something as blatant as that, you need to prove it. So he started to show me about wars that were being fought for reasons totally outside of what we were led to believe they were being fought for. That nations were being brought down by influence from within a government that had nothing to do with protecting America. That money was being drained from the coffers of the middle and lower middle class in fashions that if you and I did them, we'd be in prison. And all of this, I would have pushed back on vehemently up until that point. He spent 12 hours going from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next on the internet and showing me, because I was the show me guy. Don't tell me, show me. Showing me where I was maybe intelligent, but much more than intelligent, I was blatantly ignorant. And the two are very separate things. Okay? Just because you're intelligent doesn't mean that you're smart. Okay? Smart is having information and knowing how to utilize it. Okay? Ignorant is not having the information, so you don't know where the gaps are, where the holes are, or why you're believing something that isn't true. So after 12 hours, I got sick of him and I kicked him out of my house. Of course, I did it in a gentle fashion, very good friend. Told him he had to leave. And then I went on a search because he had opened something up in me. For the next 3 evenings, I would get off work, come home, sit on my bed with my laptop, and for hours on end, 2 of those nights, I barely slept at all, and I did my own research. Now, this is what this all boils down to, okay? Finding out that you have based an entire life on something that has no real root or something that isn't in fact true will either tear your soul out from under you or lift you up in a fashion that can't be matched. I experienced both in a 1-week period. On the other side of that week, I went back to the pub that I always went to and shot pool and threw darts and sang karaoke. And when I walked in 15 minutes after I got to the bar, a dozen people had already asked me, Roger, something's changed in you. What is it?
Yeah.
Now, does all of this sound familiar to you, Rick?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I mean, it was just, it was a rebirth, for me, completely separate from what I had been taught, that always was. And, so I had some very good years in ministry after that, before I recognized that I just felt directed to do other things. And so I started pursuing the path, that I'm on now. And what really brought this home for me was a potential family dynamic that was at play. With all of the broken home situation that I had in my childhood, my grandson was born, and his father was not going to be involved in his life. And I really determined that if I did nothing else, I was going to make a difference for that little boy. And so for 9 months, I contemplated his arrival, and I thought about, what the plight of the fatherless meant and what he was going to face. And I thought back over the years of my life and how that played into my hand. And so it was really not until he was born and I held him in the delivery room for the first time that I had this, call it a revelation, an epiphany, call it just a moment of understanding that I'd never had before. But for the first time, as I poured my love out to him, I understood God's love for me. And I wanted to do something with that. And so it led me ultimately to write my book, If Only I Had a Dad, Finding Freedom from Fatherlessness. And as I began to embark on the writing of that book, I did not realize the deep healing that was going to come to me and how I was going to have to work through that process. And so it really happened and came clear to me this way, and that is that I wrote the book to facilitate my own healing. I wanted to understand that healing. And two, I wanted to pave a path for my grandson and break a potential family dynamic. And three, I wanted to give away what wasn't mine to keep for anyone else who was needing to address the same issue in their hearts and lives. And so that was the perspective in which I wrote the book. And so I was very, very satisfied with that. And so, and then in getting the book out, I realized that, you know, the mission of that book now is what I'm embarked on. And that is connecting people to the power of their own dreams, letting them know that unconditional love means God never cuts them off and never walks away, and that there is a solution to every problem if we're willing to find it. And so my hope for a show is to facilitate that kind of process and healing for everyone who could hear it and need it.
You and I had a conversation just before Rebecca hit the record button, okay? That conversation was, we can go out, especially onto the internet, and we can literally find thousands of people who are telling you the truth. They're telling you what the problems are. They're telling you what the issues are. They're telling you what's making us poor. They're telling you what's making us suffer. They're telling you what's making us ignorant. They're telling you what's making us whatever. They are telling us all the problems that Americans and humanity as a whole are suffering from. And you reach a point in time, if you're the listener, where that just puts you into overload. The real secret to this, and something that you seem to have latched onto in a huge fashion, and is part of your persona, I think it's part of your soul, the part of your soul we can see, is your belief that telling someone the problem is necessary, but offering them a solution is just as necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no real virtue and merit to just being able to identify something that's wrong. I think we all know things are wrong. I think leadership is really about problem solving. You know, I walk my grandson to school nearly every morning during school, and our little routine goes like this. I say, we don't have problems, and he says, we have challenges. And I say, and he says, and we have a mind to solve them. So we go through that every single morning, and I tell him to do something nice for himself, and he reminds me that he needs to do something nice for somebody else. And then I said, if you think of your life this way, you'll have a great day, you'll have a great week, a great month, a great year, a great life. So I want him to think about solving challenges. You know, problems exist when nobody wants to do anything about it. Challenges,
or they don't have the knowledge.
Don't have the knowledge.
They're in that situation of programmed ignorance. Again, this show is called Eradicating Programmed Ignorance.
Right.
We literally, as a society, are living under the auspice of programmed ignorance. And most of the people who have watched this show hear me say this over and over again, but I say it for a good reason, because it needs to be impressed. Just how deep is that programmed ignorance? Just how high up does it go? If you stop and think that William Casey, the director of the CIA in 1981 to a brand new president, Reagan, in their very first cabinet meeting, is quoted as having said, We will know that our program of disinformation has succeeded when everything the American people believe is false. We're talking about at the top of the totem pole, or very near the top of the totem pole, and filtering down a level of ignorance that is programmed into a society. So someone such as you are the answer to that. Just like the Liberty Beacon Project is, just like this show, Eradicating Programmed Ignorance is. Telling people, yes, there are problems, but there are solutions. But you're going to take it, I do it on the political level, I do it on the health level, I do it on the geopolitical level. You're going to do it more on the personal level. So we're healing a society. That's half the battle. You have to heal the individuals if the society is ever really going to heal. Now, I want to turn this over to Rebecca for a second with one point, Rebecca, and that is this point. Where the heck do you find these people? My God, you just bring some of the most phenomenal people into this project. Could it be that you are going to go down in history as one of the best media directors ever to have existed?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
All right. So, go ahead.
I have my secrets.
Yes, I'm sure you do. And right now it's tough listening to you because the internet spook is playing with you right now, so it's tough to understand you. But we did get what you said. And we are very appreciative of your initial friendship with Rick, because I don't believe if you didn't have that friendship with Rick, Rick wouldn't be sitting in front of us right now. But I've listened to you talk about Rick when Rick wasn't listening. And I've listened to Rick talking about you when you weren't listening. And the one thing that I have determined is there is a very high level of respect that is mutual between you. And I don't think you need me to tell you that.
Yeah, for me,
thank you.
I mean,
You know, it's very interesting when you find.
Yeah, you faded out, Rebecca. What were you going to say, Rick?
I was going to say, you know, the more you spend time with Rebecca and getting to know her and her perspective on things, you know, the better you feel. You know, you already appreciate her and like her and respect her, but then it just grows from there. You know, she has that aura about her that's just, you know, wonderful. It's just great. It's just you like to be with people like her, you know.
Do you know what the best part of this is, Rick? The best part of this is she's sitting there listening. She can hear everything we're saying, and she can't say very much back. So we can say anything we want. And the sad part of this is, which is actually the good part, is that there's actually nothing bad I can think of to say about Rebecca, even if I wanted to, which I don't. And besides, as a veteran Marine and a retired police officer, I don't know if I would want to say something bad because I'm not that far away from her. Yeah, and she'll jump on that Harley and scream over here into Arkansas, and that might be the last breath I take, or I'll get the whooping of my life. But anyway, all right, so let's take this a little bit further. First off, I'm going to put you on the spot. Have you decided on a name for your show? And I think you might have already said it, but if you have, let's reiterate that, and then let's talk about a little bit more about what the show is going to be about. I know what you hope to gain from it. You've already told us that, and that I absolutely loved. Okay, let's talk about what the show is going to be about, what type of guests you're looking for, what type of topics you wish to cover. I know from a conversation that you and I had that you're not exactly happy with the politics going on in this country, as anybody with even the slightest conservative way of thinking wouldn't be. We've got liberals that are literally tearing this country apart. And I'm not going to tell you that all conservatives have the right ideas and the right ideals, because I don't honestly believe that. I believe the answers are somewhere in between. I believe that the biggest problem with this government is that this representative government has stopped being representative. And if they would take the time to listen to people like you and me and Rebecca and all of the people who live in the heartland of this country, they would find out exactly what we think and exactly what they need to do, not only to make us happy, but to cure the ails of this country. We need to go back to a representative government. It doesn't exist today, or it exists in such a very small portion that most of us can't even recognize it. And our children today think this is the way America is supposed to be. And that's the biggest catastrophe of all of this, that our children are taught today, this is the way America is supposed to be, and nothing could be further from the truth. How far off base am I, Rick?
No, I mean, I personally, I think you're right on, Roger. For me, public service has been taken over by public office, and they're two completely different paradigms. And one of them being, a representation for every individual's benefit versus the kind of office that you have to have enough money to buy your influence. And that's just not working. Not even for the special interest. It's just not working. And for me, I think life was designed with such wisdom that it was created to be simple. And all of our problems come because we don't like simplicity. We complicate stuff, and then we have to undo those complications. And that's, I think, where we're at now. We've created such a complicated mess with webs, reaching out in so many different directions. And it's divided us. It has, affected us in ways that we can't even find civility in our public discourses anymore. And we have to change this. It's our country. We love it. We're thankful for it. We appreciate it. And we're going to have to battle to bring it back into focus and reestablish the things that it was designed to do in the first place.
Holy crap. You just said a big old mouthful. Now let's take that on the last leg of this discussion, because we're getting close to the end here. This is basically an intro show, and we've accomplished that, except one thing. And that just brings us to the last question, or the last thing I asked you to answer in my last little rant here. And that is, how does this pertain to your show? What type of guest do you expect to have? What type of message do you expect to put forward? I already know the mechanism. What I'd like to know is the operation of that mechanism now, if you would, please.
Sure. Yeah. The people that I will bring onto the show are people who are solution oriented, and they're already driving solutions. And I want to help be a facilitator to empower people to not only become responsible for their own lives, but to know that they actually want to be in control of their life, that you don't want that turned over to somebody else. And to help that process by actual practical nuts and bolts of things that you can bring into your daily living that actually put you in the driver's seat, help you feel the power of your own dreams and your own destiny, and to fill your heart full of hope that you know that you can actually go out and do those things.
Wow.
Those are the types of guests that I will look for from many different angles, not just one single viewpoint, but I think there's a way to make a difference in every segment of society. And so I'm going to look for people in those segments. Many I already know and have a relationship with, and so I'll be bringing them on board. But others, I will look for people who are making a difference, not just talking and selling, but actually making a difference.
Well, I'll tell you what, I probably couldn't have asked for much more than what you've already delivered. And I, for one, am eagerly looking forward to your first solo show. And Rebecca, I know it's not the greatest internet connection, but have you got something to add here? Because it's just not right that you're not saying anything. And I know there's a reason for it, but try, okay?
Well, I'm really excited, Rick, for your show, because I think that the message that you have to share on so many different levels is going to be very, very life-changing for many people. So this is something that I think is right in your arena at the right time.
Why is it that we come all the way to the end of the show and all of a sudden she says a whole mouthful and she doesn't break up once? Okay, I don't like that. But at least we got to hear what you wanted to say, or at least some of what you wanted to say. Rick,
Sure.
take about a minute or two, wrap it up, and say anything that you'd like to say to close the show off. Let me tell everybody watching, this was everything I hoped the discussion would be.
Well, Roger, thanks. I mean, it's been a pleasure to meet you and get to know you a little bit, and same with Rebecca. And there is certainly a vibe here that I can connect to. That is driven by the intentions of making things better. And I like that. I'm comfortable with that. I was actually searching and looking for the right venue to take my next steps. And this just kind of opened up in really one of those fashions that you have to sit back and say, this is, being orchestrated, and this is the way things are supposed to happen. So, the feeling that you're extending toward me of feeling welcome and being made a part of, something that I think already has momentum and already has a great foundation. We want to come on board and contribute to that, and to the larger efforts that you're laboring to accomplish, and find our place there among that. And we've got our niche, and so we want to concentrate on that. And I expect through the opportunities that you have created, that many lives will be touched. And if I can do anything, it will be to work hard to let things happen. And so I have a great expectation for what can happen when people get the information they need and the understanding along with it on how to utilize it in their life. So that's,
well, I'll tell you what.
Show.
You pretty much ran on the theme, and I thought it was a phenomenal thing of the importance of family. Whether you're talking about a father-son relationship, it doesn't matter, okay? Family. Rebecca will tell you this, okay, because I'm a firm believer in this. Everybody who comes into this project with the idea that they wish to contribute something to the forward motion of this project is part of the Liberty Beacon family. I use that word a lot. We are a family. And if we're not a family, then just like so many other, I mean, how many corporate offices have you walked into where you could feel the chill in the air, where there was no real connection, where things were getting accomplished, but not on a level or at a magnitude that was possible? Why? Because that trust wasn't there. Why? Because that feeling of comradeship wasn't there. Why? Because that feeling of family wasn't there. Okay? I am also a firm believer, and Rebecca will tell you this, and she probably rolled her eyes. She's heard this so many times. I make up what's called memes. These are little pictures with words on them.
Right.
One of my favorites is, and you also discussed this point, on leadership. And the meme reads, and these are all thoughts from my head and my heart, not stolen from anybody else, but the sign of true leadership is in those you choose to stand beside you, not behind you. If I have to turn around to tell you to do something, my feeling is that you are beneath me or behind me. If I can look to the left or the right and you're standing right next to me, then the connection is there and the ability to move forward is a lot less hindered. So there's a lot of wisdom in everything you've said to us. And I very much appreciate it, Rick. Any last words, Rebecca? Okay, so Rebecca.
No, I think
Yep, and they cut off on you again. Sorry about that. I wish you could have said something. But everybody's going to have to just put up with the fact that it was my blabbermouth and your wisdom, Rick, that ruled this show. And maybe next time, because we've done so many shows, Rebecca, and your connection has been good. So it's just one of those things. At least you were here. At least you brought a phenomenal guest and a phenomenal new host to the TLBTV project and into the Liberty Beacon project. And we appreciate you for that, Rebecca, as much as we appreciate Rick for being here. So for everybody watching, this has been another episode of Eradicating Programmed Ignorance, brought to you by the Liberty Beacon Project and broadcast on TLBTV. Y'all have a real good night. Thank you.